Thank you, Catherine. Welcome, everybody. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Shane Getson. He's MLA for Lac Ste and Parkland area. He was first elected to the legislature in 2019 and re-elected in May 2023. Mr. Getson has been a steadfast advocate for the constituents and the broader Alberta community. In his tenure, he has undertaken significant roles, including serving on various legislative committees and leading task forces focused on economic corridors and career education, something he's here to talk about tonight. His dedication to enhancing Alberta's infrastructure and economic landscape was recognized with his appointment as the Parliamentary Secretary for Economic Corridors in October 2022, and subsequently as the Chief Government Whip and Parliamentary Secretary for Economic Corridor Development in July of 2023. Before entering public service, Mr. Getson amassed over 28 years of experience in industrial construction, working across sectors such as oil and gas, mining, telecommunications, and forestry. And he was owner of major projects consulting company, where he played a pivotal role in numerous large-scale infrastructure projects throughout Canada and the US. Beyond all this work, as an entrepreneur as well as MLA, Mr. Getson is deeply rooted in his community. Residing in Parkland County for over a decade, he and his wife have raised 4 children on their farm. In addition to that, he's an avid pilot and an aviation enthusiast, often taken to the skies to capture beauty of Alberta, sharing his passion with others. Shane, thank you very much for your service. The floor is now yours.
Sir, I always call you minister. You're not. You're not
giving me a promotion, and I keep turning it down. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. You just left the house. So you've been in the house all afternoon, so we appreciate you rushing over here to come. Full disclosure, so everyone knows, I also sit on the Parkland, Lac Ste and Parkland constituency board, so we get to work quite closely with Shane, and our company in Atchison works extremely closely with Shane as well, and on some of the initiatives that we're going to maybe talk about tonight. So I guess there's no better topic right now, of course, than what's going on, tariffs, trades, all of that. And so we thought maybe tonight we would talk a little bit about things like free trade, foreign trade zones, and that sort of thing in light of what's going on with our neighbors to the north. So maybe why don't we start out with that? I know you've been traveling a lot. You've been down in the U.S. quite a bit. Just give us a bit of an opening statement maybe as to where you see things on this Tuesday and where things are at in terms of the tariffs and the trade talks and those things.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate this too, and it's like family and friends here. So I'm not really a polished politician, and hopefully it comes out that way because it's always going to be honest from the heart. If there's any questions, it's going to be off the cuff as well. So first of all, the phrase "drill baby drill" for us equals "build baby build." That's literally what's going to be taking place. So I'm very privileged, like I'm the parliamentary secretary to the premier, so I get to work on the intergovernmental relations, intergovernmental affairs portfolio as well. We have a transboundary group. There's a number of us private members that get to participate in that, and a lot of that is down across in the U.S. National Council of State Legislators, Council of State Governments, Pacific Northwest Economic Region. I also sit on another group called the Energy Council, which has been around forever. It's all the energy producing states and Alberta and Saskatchewan. So in these different venues, we sit full-on participants at those tables. The representatives and the congressmen and the senators that we deal with, we're going through the trenches on a number of issues back and forth, talking about transboundary issues, talking about the impacts of their economy, how it works with us. And I can tell you full well, regardless of the rhetoric that's out there in the media, when you're sitting across the table from a senator or representative in their own house, and they're telling you about the 13-year-old kid just down the road from them that used to mow their lawn that died of a fentanyl overdose, this is very personal. That's where this is coming from. And this isn't just new. This isn't just this year. These are stories that we've been hearing for a number of years. Moreover, on the defense file, when you hear them talking about why aren't you pulling your share, these are Democratic senators they're asking, not the Republicans. Why are you not pulling your share? And we have to understand their perspective on this. Talking recently, and I was fortunate enough to be down, invited to the inauguration. It was by a actual senator in Michigan that invited me down. He's congressman. He lobbied him. There's only so many tickets they have for that event. And I was fortunate enough to be invited by these colleagues. Now, the reason why I was invited is because that gentleman was up here 2 years ago, and we had him up in Atchison. We toured him around the area, him and a few other colleagues. There was 4 of these U.S. folks. You ever work with U.S. folks? Anybody? They're a little patriotic, aren't they? Yeah, no, it's a good thing. So picture this. We're sitting in Supreme Steel. Background, I've got 4 senators up on stage. We had a few of the businesses come out. They helped us out. We had toured them around the area. This is the end of their day, of about a 7-hour day of kind of seeing what we've got going on in the capital region. In behind them is this backdrop of a big Alberta flag. And I've got them doing the same thing we're doing here right now, Cam. So I'm out in the audience playing Jerry Springer, going back and forth, asking them questions of what they observed. And they were talking about the energy that we had, not the energy in the ground, the energy of the people, the technology, the prowess, everything else that they had going on here. They were stoked. The guy from Chicago, he's a Democrat. He's totally gushing and telling us about the Roger Victory. He's a Republican down from Michigan. They're all talking about it. Now, what we did here is I got our caucus to sign off on some flags, some medium-sized flags, not little guys, not huge ones, but some medium-sized flags. I handed these out so they had signatures from all of our caucus and appreciation for their coming. These American senators stood up on their own volition and started waving the Alberta flag.
I got pictures of that. Yeah,
those are the connections that we've made. So when these folks are inviting us down there into their backyard for their president to be sworn in, it's kind of a big deal. Now, the reason why Roger invited us there is because he also invited me and a gent from Ontario. So he's essentially my equivalent that I am to the premier. That's his equivalency to Doug Ford. They wanted to know what the heck was going on up here. They wanted to know where we're at in the fentanyl situation. They want to know where we're in the defense situation. And they wanted to cut through the rhetoric. So it comes down to this: kitchen table diplomacy. If you have a personal connection and you can pick up the phone and you can trust the person on the other line because you've seen their backyard, you know where they live, you know where they come from, you've had those conversations, that's how this works. And that's what I observed that week while I was down the inauguration. And it wasn't just us and the Americans, it was us and the world. I got invited to the Watergate Hotel to meet with the ambassador of Albania, talking about gas and how we can get them gas so we can get electricity to Italy. Like, that was the profound thing to seeing that. And the thing that came through time and time again was, you have to tell your story. This administration is going to make decisions based on the best information that they have. So when we've had other policymakers or politicians at different levels, whether it's at the state level or the provincial level or the federal level, God help us, when they start up at a microphone, the first thing they want to do is they're fixing for a fight and they're going to use us as the leverage and the stick. That doesn't bode well down with the U.S. administration. And quite frankly, when they're picking up the phone and giving us back channel communications going, if you keep doing what Doug Ford's doing, you guys are going to get whacked really hard in the West. Like, what is going on up there? So it was because of the premier doing that work, making those connections, having a good old Alberta boy like Jordan Peterson down there in that camp doesn't hurt us, having those connections with the other folks that got Officer Kevin O'Leary. Those personal connections and talking to Trump before he was sworn in are huge, because he wasn't the president yet. Once he's president, it's a different story. Making those personal connections, having those back channels, that's what's going to navigate us through this. And quite frankly, again, coming back to that point, drill, baby, drill equals build, baby, build. And we're going to have to keep our heads and our wits about us. And you can't get caught up in the whole Team Canada thing and using Alberta as the sacrificial lamb, because that dog don't hunt.
So, like many of you, I woke up this morning and my phone was just ablaze with the news that Trump is again talking Keystone Pipeline, that he's talking about the reality of it. Tell us on your level, on your end, what's the story there? What are you hearing? Is it rhetoric? Is it reality? Where are we at in that?
Yeah, well, that one's near and dear to my heart. Since 2009, I've been messing around with Keystone XL. I mean, I was still a consultant. I was over at TransCanada and over at Enbridge at the same time, and we were looking at control systems for XL. At Enbridge, the way we managed to beat XL to the punch is we literally built down to Superior, down to Chicago, bought up a couple other pipelines, headed over to the Gulf, and we've been pumping oil ever since. TransCanada took this alternate approach, confrontational, we might say sometimes, but controversial at others. But what Trump did when he was in administration, he signed off on 2 presidential crossing orders. One was for the Alberta to Alaska Railroad, which originated in northern Alberta, kind of picked a route, crossed over into Alaska through the Yukon. I know this fella. He plays football, and also I used to work with him. Good to see you. And then the other one he signed off on was Keystone XL. So unfortunately, here's what happened. Politics got in the way of good pragmatic common sense and pipelining. So when the Biden administration canceled that thing, they had to go out and on the world stage and suck up to some pretty despot nations to make that backfill of the 850,000 to 1 million barrels a day. So does Trump want this thing to go? Absolutely. Because there's a couple of things that happen there. So they depleted their strategic reserves to keep their markets buoyed with their domestic gasoline and oil prices. So they need to fill their strategic reserves. They've been making promises in their policy when you're going to see this happening. Instead of doing it through force protection of the military, they're trying to be an energy power. So if you sign the deals and you do those things, like they're talking about, with Germany, if you're buying gas, buy from us. Just finished talking to India and saying, hey, buy another $10 billion worth of gas from us. Things are going to be cool, Modi. The only way they do that in the short order to make that work, to make that new diplomacy work of having those energy connections, is for us to get our stuff down to them. That's how this works. So I'm very excited about it. And it's not just that. There's going to be a number of projects that'll be going through the Midwest like you wouldn't believe. Again, building out that concept of Fortress North America. That whole, you heard about the 51st state pitch? Have you heard about that one? You know the first guy that pitched that? Ben Franklin, when he was sitting there talking with the Brits about how they were going to carve up North America, he had 5 big asks. One of them was Canada. He didn't get it, but he got, that latter part, southern part of Quebec, which is now the Minnesota, Ohio, and that area. So this isn't anything new. This concept has been on the table forever. Trump's just one of those, very, very boisterous guys that says it out loud. And I think, quite honestly, was to get the conversation going, knock us off our skates a bit.
Yeah.
And, if anything he's going to do, he's going to change out our federal administration because he has no taste for Trudeau and that group. I can tell you that full well. That isn't fake. The folks that he has around him know what happened up here, and they're absolutely 180 from that. The other thing that he's managed to do is to get Canadians being Canadians again. Like nothing like somebody next door actually saying, hey, you guys are just a state. You're not a country anymore. Why don't you pull up your socks? Yeah. So I think that's the windfall we're going to see from this, whether you want to take your lumps or not. Deal with the issues at hand. All of a sudden, we're looking at this Fortress North America. We're having to put our hat in our hand a little bit and talk about the real things, take care of those. But so far, from what we've seen and what I've heard from other tables, he's not complex. He'll tell you this stuff over here, but he wants you to do that. Is he going to bargain with you? Absolutely. But he wants those things taken care of. Take care of those things, move on to the next item.
Yeah, so totally agree. I think it is, I hope it is uniting our country a little bit more. I put my little pin on here today. I was in a board meeting this morning, and a board member threw it at me. And so I thought, well, we'll wear it because it's key. So that being said, before we sort of get into FTZ, let's talk about this a little bit because businesses are asking this. So our federal government wants to retaliation of tariff, percentage for percentage, back and forth. What's that going to do? Like, honestly, how some say that will take us into recession. Some say it will take us into economic downfall. Just from your perspective, from a government perspective, what does it value us to do the you do it to us, we do it to you type of thing?
Yeah. Might feel good for the first little bit, and then you see everybody around you go bankrupt. Like, that's awesome. It's not a hockey game. Like, you're talking about people's lives. And, there wasn't just this question here. There was a minister recently minted out in British Columbia that's been part of Panama with us, and he's been pushing back on pipelines his whole career. Sitting down in Oregon, all of a sudden the tariffs are going to come on. We just managed on the tarmac of that day through some back channel communications to dodge that bullet, getting the information back to the premier, back to those back channels. And this guy wants to start a fight with the U.S. Rah, 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 rah. And then he's asking me, well, would you think Alberta would be interested in building pipelines? I said, well, welcome to friggin' 2009. Yeah, we had them all on the books. Like, what you're not understanding here is, I said, I've been in a couple tussles in my life. It's just one of those personalities growing up as a young farm boy and working on pipelines and those things. You kind of run your mouth a bit. You better reach your hands up. And this gentleman knows that generation, what it's about. The new generation thinks it's all keyboard warrior stuff. In our day, you actually had to, put up or shut up. So in those tussles that I had as a young man growing up, I learned a very quick lesson. Don't start a fight you can't finish. And if you do get into it, you go hard as fast as you can to end it as quick as you can. A protracted trade war with the U.S., like, 90% of our economy is down there. 78%, 9%, 80% of our economy in the country is tied to the US. So your plan, your massive plan here is to tariff everything of your own people. We've already been hit coming out of COVID recovery. You've already shut down a lot of the sectors. We've seen a flight of capital. You've had this roulette reel of regulatory policy and cancellations. And on top of that, we've had this blessed carbon scam that's been going on, that's been driving everybody in the poorhouse, driving the cost. The affordability is like within a hair's breadth of where we're at. We've never had such a high debt ratio. So your plan is, this is your big punch back at the States, to tax everybody in the poorhouse and make them go bankrupt. That'll show them. Like, I can't see that. So that's why we've been putting in all this effort, Cam, quite honestly, to say, look, we don't want to get into that. If you're going to tax us on a few things, like, let's put it in perspective. The only reason why we got a 10% thing on energy is because Alberta and Saskatchewan were down there talking to them. That's it. Full stop. Otherwise, it would have been 25% across the board. You know, we won't get the credit in the newspapers. You won't hear this type of thing because that's not the narrative. It's easier to sell papers when everyone's all riled up talking about having a fight. So 10% on our energy. Well, it's already discounted for the dollar. It's already discounted at the rate. So they're actually getting a good deal on anyway, probably a 30-point, 40-point discount when you look at the differential in the rate exchange. So putting a 10% tax on their pumps, whatever. They're only paying 70 cents a liter down there. You cross the border into Montana. So that's not going to hurt them too much. So our response for them, you know, still buying our products and taxing their ratepayers a little bit more is to put our folks in the poorhouse. That's one of the stupidest plans I've ever heard. Might make you feel good again for a while, but it doesn't make me feel too good when I've got constituents in the poorhouse and hanging up their keys.
I really wish you'd speak your mind on some of these issues.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't hold back.
I love it. I love it. So if not retaliatory tariffs, what do we do as Canadians? How is Canada gonna weather this? How is Alberta gonna weather this? Should he carry out his, I don't want to call it a threat, but I guess it is.
Yeah, no.
How do we weather that?
Yeah, so
as business,
suck it up, Buttercup. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, we're gonna have to eat our pride a bit. You're gonna have to take your licks. Yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, sir. You're gonna have to mitigate damage as much as you can until, and while we're doing this, don't lose the opportunity of a great crisis, right? You know, you got everybody wants to build pipelines. You know, the guys that have been opposing us for years. Well, they want this. Well, we should have had energy east. Yeah, no kidding. We had to explain to the politicians down east, and this is how stupid it got. I thought it was rhetoric. They literally did not know. Our oil goes down through the States, back into Superior, Wisconsin. It becomes full choke, full price now, because now it's U.S. oil. They were getting it at a discount from us. Now it's full price, and then you sell it back to Quebec and Ontario. They had no idea that's where 40% of their energy was coming from. So their idea was to cut the tap off. Okay, shut your lights out at home, guys. Like, that's it. So now we've got people that want to build infrastructure. So we had an emergency debate yesterday in the opposition over there. And I'm not going to get too political, but again, these are the folks that have been arguing against me for years on the corridor concept even. Now they're standing up saying, we don't have a plan. We need to get this in place. We need to start building infrastructure. And it's like, yeah. So the same thing I said in my statement to them, suck it up, Buttercup. You are actually going to have to support and fast track infrastructure, linear infrastructure projects on a major scale, major projects. You're going to have to rubber stamp and approve those things. This is a national emergency. So call this a national emergency, a national energy emergency, some sovereignty issue, whatever you want. Slam these damn things through. 14 years to build a pipeline or 11 years to build a power line ain't going to cut it. So if we're going to do anything as Albertans, we're making folks understand that, yeah, we're all on board with this. The internal trade barriers, we've dropped our trade barriers for years. We've been waiting for everybody else to catch up. So let's press that. As Canadians, yeah, Team Canada, go. McDavid scored the goal. All right. So let's score this one too. Push people and tell them the only way we get out of this isn't by fairy tales and pixie dust. It's by getting our commodities, our raw products to market and to entice manufacturing back here, to look at where our competitive advantages aren't so that we can balance the sheet and see where they are. As investors, as business people, the last thing you're going to do is go to your banker and creditors and say, yeah, I got an idea, but it's not really based on much because everything I looked at in the last 10 years failed. So you got to have a plan that's got some security. You need contracts, you need certainty in place, and you need to make sure that those other things that have been keeping us uncompetitive, whether it's tariffs or taxes or any of those other impediments, those have to have some certainty in it for a given timeline so you can talk to your creditors and you can invest. And moreover, the windfall we're going to get from this, is that other countries, because Trump isn't just doing this to us, he's rattling the saber at everybody going, look, you've been riding on our coattails for years, knock this off. Again, that whole energy play. They want security as well. They want other trade partnerships. It wasn't by accident. The Albanian guy was asking me to meet at the Watergate. There's no auspicious, things like that. So to meet at the Watergate and talk. Nor was it when I was over in India Energy Week. I took a personal holiday last 10 days to go see what India was up to. People want to do business with us. They want to work. The Germans came here 3 times already, coming directly to Alberta to see what's going on. This is something that people actually want to talk about. So we got an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That silver lining is in it is, and we forget this sometimes, with the dollar the way it is. We think for us, of course, in going into the U.S., the dollar is it's so hard, but look at it from their point of view.
Yep.
And why wouldn't they invest in Canada? And so that brings people here, that brings business here, it brings taxes, it brings all of those kinds of things for us. So I think in it all, there is a bit of a silver lining that we can take advantage of right now. Let's talk a little bit about East-West trade in Canada, because that's a huge issue and it's been coming up over and over again. I was in a seminar the other night where they talked about Ontario imports most of its beef, the majority of its beef, from Texas, not from Alberta. So as I sat there in that seminar, we have the best beef in the world. We have some of the largest herds in the world. Why in heaven's name would Ontario be importing their beef from Texas when they have a fellow province, 4 over, I didn't pass geography, that has the best beef in the world? And that was just one of just myriad of products that they're getting out of there when we can be producing and providing in an East-West trade.
Oh, because we're the colony.
Okay.
Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, over my career of working in different areas, Ontario, one of them, was literally, we were down there doing fiber optics across the country. One of our offices out of Mississauga, sitting there, we go to this little house party afterwards, and the accountant comes up and asks what my funny accent is all about. Because I didn't say a boot, apparently, but all about. And he goes, oh, you're from Alberta. Oh, the colonies. This isn't anything new. I've ran into a guy at the gun range who used to be the CEO of Seagram's. Yeah, avid shooter. Why not? So, we put it in our constitutional rights here in Alberta. We're very proud of that. So with meeting the guy at the gun range, he used to work for Seagram's as CEO. He says, when Harper's out, he says, everybody down there hated him. He says, we're at all these events. Everybody hated Harper because he was from the West. And I'm going, well, what's next? Like, they would rather that than to have somebody from the West run the country. Yeah. He says, you don't understand, like, when you've worked there for years, how deep-seated some of this is. So when I'm sitting down in Washington, D.C., I've got the guy from Michigan who sat down the 2 Canadians at the table so we could literally talk. That's how bonkers it's become. So when you've got one group running out there because they're looking at poll increases of how they're going to go up in the polls for their own little provincial election or municipal election, it's causing international damage. And there we're looking at us, and I finally had to explain it to this guy, and I can't tell you his name, but he says about the tariffs. And I had to put my hand up, and I don't often do that, when he started to talk over me, and the third time was about enough. And I said, let me stop you. Like, please. We remember Trudeau 1. National Energy Program, it hit us hard. I said, I didn't see Ontario when we had the new group come in here. We've been paying full choke for the carbon tax and everything on us, and it's been hitting us disproportionately on tanker bans. I didn't see Ontario flinch once. We lost a couple 100,000 jobs back in our province because of all of these other policies. I did not see Ontario flinch once. Now, you're concerned about your automotive sector. So because you're going to have a loss of jobs, those 200,000 some odd jobs that we've had, everything we've been doing to build our economy up to get it going again, and then we've had to build to the U.S. as our number one partner. Your idea is to take more cash from us, because he said, well, you guys are kind of like Quebec. I said, yeah, with one exception of being loud and boisterous. We pay for all y'all. You and Quebec, you took $500 million from us this year. Yeah. That's, that's our money. So now we've paid you out to be the privilege to be Canadians. You've been against us and obstructionist all the way along. And now you're asking my guys again to take a hit financially. And then you're going to tax us yet again and take more off our energy reserves. I said, why would my people want to do any of that? Because you're going to lose a couple automotive jobs. This doesn't work. And it wasn't until you get blunt sometimes, and he's a good guy. Like, honestly, I like this guy. He's a good man to talk to. And that's why I was that blunt. He's Dutch, so it worked out okay. But you have to have those blunt conversations. We have so many barriers internally within our country because, coming back to our roots in the trade corridors, the cattle went north-south. They never went east-west. When you look at our history of how we came about, the whole cattle trade and everything else, our energy sector goes north-south. Half our populations cross the borders. When a calf is born in Montana, it's raised up across in Alberta because the feed is here, and then we put it back to the U.S. and it gets finished off, and then it might get to the butcher plant there. All of our stuff is so integrated back and forth. The Milk River, we share that waterway. The irrigation messes up on our side, crops fail in the south. We have already been across this border back and forth. I don't know the last time I took a road trip to Ontario, but I can tell you I've driven down to Montana lots over the last couple of months.
I saw that on Yellowstone once, how they did that. Anyway.
About the Calgary? That's the only bad thing about Calgary is in Canada.
Okay, we've gone a few directions here. We're really here to talk about free trade and free trade zones. And that's a bit of a buzzword. Where I come from in Atchison, we talk about this all the time. There probably isn't a day that doesn't go by where we don't talk about free trade zones and the advantage of that to business and what it does. But maybe before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it, give us an overview of what that is. When we talk free trade zone, what are we actually talking here?
Yeah, so the Fed's got some pretty cool programs out there if we can ever flex it and you can get some consistency and approval and nomenclature. So when I first ran across this one, because again, meeting with these other U.S. groups and going back and forth and trying to figure out, Texas to Alaska through Alberta was kind of the idea. We are the gateway to the north. We want to take advantage of that. And then you talk to the fellows in Saskatchewan. They're doing really good on the energy file, rare earth minerals, obviously with the uranium. And then right outside their airport in Regina, they put up this foreign trade zone, 1,800 acres of a business park, no tax. I'm going, how in the heck did you guys do this? So they take us for a tour, and that's the cool thing about traveling and seeing what other folks are doing. So one of their ministers got together with the one down in Ontario, basically, and said, okay, we want to make this a foreign trade zone. So anything within that bubble, you're not paying the taxes as it comes in. You only pay on that product when you're finished at whatever rate that is going out. So then I took that away and started scratching it out. And I'm looking, okay, these corridors, how do we tie stuff? What are we moving from one jurisdiction or another? If you had a corridor that tied in interprovincially or interstate from those points of origin, then you look at what commodities you can trade or move back and forth. So take the automotive sector as an example. If in Ontario, and they have the best one that they've already should have done this, if they had a foreign trade zone on either sides of the border, they wouldn't be taxing each component until finally the thing stopped and then it hit the line at the end, and then you apply an aggregate tax. That would actually make us more internationally competitive. So you would grow the pie by doing that. You'd have these inherent trade relationships, these partners. You'd have further integration into it. And on the global stage, again, it would make us more competitive without having to have disproportionate tariffs on some of those other items coming in. You still have your agreements, deal with the geopolitical things. But again, we could start building stuff back here again because we could afford to do it and our population could afford to buy it.
So just for clarification's sake, so the free trade zone, is that a federal issue or is that a provincial issue? Because it seems the feds would say it's theirs, and yet provincially, you know what I mean? Like Canada, it's a bit of an obscure type of.
Yeah. So from what I've observed so far, you need to apply to the feds. It's something that they would apply on you for that foreign trade zone. And you can have a municipality or business could do it on personal dockage, but the best footprint that I've seen is the province itself of Saskatchewan stood up and did it. Because then you could have, instead of just your shop or a couple, storefronts, you literally put a big chunk and you can dial a circle around it. And when I first started talking to the aviation community about it, and Edmonton Global knew about it as well, Myron Keene had known about it, the whole idea of having an airport in proximity, well, now you've got opened up in the world. It's not just the corridor being, planes, trains, right? You can actually have those incoming traffic from other nations coming into those areas too. So I think what we need is a coalition of the willing, a lot of really good programs we've never known about. And then we have to lobby our MPs or MLAs. I hate to say that, but lobby us too. And then you're elected to say, okay, let's get an answer, define what our area is, what our ask is, and then lobby the heck out of this to get some decisions. And from what I've seen so far, even if you go to the government page, that doesn't give you a fine definition to it. It's kind of a wag. So whoever's working on the file at the time may have some wiggle room. But I think if you look at the overall context, and then, you know, looking at what you guys brought my mind to down in Crockett, Texas, they did something similar. So now if you connect a free trade zone or a tariff-free zone to another tariff-free zone, again, you can start magnifying that, I guess, you know, or, multiplying it to that extent, and then really look at how you can build stuff here again, and then get it to your own people in competitive value, and then obviously internationally.
Right. And many American counties, states and counties are doing a phenomenal job of this. And just to give you a bit of history. So our company, Genics in Atchison, we are moving some of our operation to Crockett, Texas, that is within a free trade zone. We bring in raw material from overseas that comes in through the port of Galveston. And then we will take that raw material and manufacture it in Texas. And the reason being is that we don't have to pay tax on that material. It comes in through customs. It's set up that customs doesn't even open they won't even open our sea cans. We have to report it, obviously, and they'll come through and check it from time to time. We take it, we manufacture, and because it comes in through a free trade zone, we are then we don't have to pay the tax, and then we are able to sell it and not pay tax on that either. So it's a win-win for us. It's a win-win for our customers, of course, because of the price variations that we can do. But this is what we'd like to see here. And is that like you talked about it, is it a reality for us in Alberta?
It is, yeah.
Because this to me, it seems like could be a real answer in this whole tariff situation.
Yeah, it is. And the cool part about this is because Saskatchewan's already done it. So now I know that model. They just went through their election there again. They're settled in, so I can grab that model and we can apply it out here. So those are the things that we need. And this room is great because I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. Now I've got caffeine on tap. You guys are never going to make it through. I get excited about this stuff because, yeah, we can do it. We just need a coalition of the willing and stop playing the damn three-legged races and shooting each other in the feet when we're trying to get across the finish line together. Yes, sir.
Is this what they've done in Calgary? Like, what's that big transport hub they just announced in the last couple of days?
Honestly, I don't know. You'll have to shoot me the story. Yeah, if they've used that model, in all likelihood, there's some other cross dock type things. Like you'll have clearing houses. I Googled a bunch of these things and pulled them up.
30,000 jobs.
Yeah, like there's also the potential for inland ports, that type of idea, right? When you're bringing in your things.
It's a transport hub.
Yeah, so if it's a transport hub, yeah. But again, I don't know for sure. Like I would have to go look at that and see if that has applied that foreign trade zone to that. If they did, it would make sense. Agreed. Now here's the other one we got to figure out. Everyone's intonating about the Arctic, right? Like how many people know why? Do you guys know? Put you on the spot. Yeah, okay, transportation. Why the Arctic?
Yeah.
Yeah, Northwest Passage, but moreover, the Southwest Passage. So right now, today, like climate change is an amazing thing. Every 10,000 years, there's glaciation periods. We happen to be in one of those areas where all that pack ice doesn't really exist anymore. So we're in a really unique position. And that's why everybody in the world is scrambling for icebreakers, because you can actually break the ice. It's not going to be year over year ice like it was before. It's actually seasonal ice. So the Russians and the Chinese right now have joint Coast Guard operations off the Southwest Passage, which is right along the coast of Siberia. Hardly any ice there. That's where they're running their phantom fleet of oil tankers because the embargoes really didn't stick. They just got the ships that nobody else was using, send it to Turkey or India, refine it, and it's off to the global markets. They're literally running these things nonstop. Now that's opening up with the Northwest Passage. China's an Arctic nation, don't you know? When I was over in Reykjavik, Premier sent me over to Reykjavik. First time I'd been there, I'm like, well, this is going to be interesting. And it was just me and Dave Kettles went there to go see what this is about. 2,500 people are all talking about it. It's all the Arctic nations. And the Arctic nations like India, Singapore, Japan, China, Korea. So why are they in our backyard? You know, first question, right? And when I'm looking at some of these things about climate crisis, and they're using Jasper as an example of why the world's burning up and the Arctic is in flames if we don't all stop using combustible engines. It's like, okay, you're talking about our stuff and we're literally not there. Government of Canada, so GAC, Government Affairs Canada, I had individuals coming up and asking me why I'm there as Alberta at a Canadian event. It was mind-boggling. So being there in that room, I understood very full well. A lot of the things I was working on that task force before was that is the quickest way I can shave 10 days off your moving products and materials. Yeah. Because if you believe in a globe, flat earth guys will have to come up with another example. But if you're believing in the globe, I can save you 10 days of shipping. Moreover, the boats I'm going to build you, the ships, don't have to be Panamax. I don't have to go through the Panama Canal. I can get major ships going back and forth here. That's why India's building a ton of icebreakers. That's why Japan's building for everybody else. That's why Russia's got 14 of them on the hopper and going more. This is the reason why. The new south is north, and that's in our backyard. And that's why Trump is looking at Greenland. That's why everybody's looking at what's happening, because that's where all the stuff is going to happen. It's literally the closest point. The other one, and to scare you a little bit because of the Ukraine conflict, so there was speculation that Russia and China might have these Mach 10 missiles that they could do. They're not ICBMs, but they can use for conventional. Hey, what do you know? What did they use in Kiev? What that does for our Arctic is all of a sudden a Mach 10 missile. We don't have this big buffer we did before. This stuff is real. It's in our backyard. And when you've got the head of NATO standing up in a room full of 2,000 people and demanding an apology from the Chinese ambassador about he was a conspiracy, this, and you were calling me this, and you guys are doing these operations. This stuff is getting pretty sporty on the global stage. And when they're talking about, you folks have to understand, and this is all the European nations, you have to understand what your policies are doing. If we're in a position to defend you, we can't because you're hamstringing us. And these are the global realities. Food, energy, rare earth elements and minerals, and it's in the Arctic. So that's why these other nations are looking at it. They're coveting it. And that's why China's trying to declare these all international waters, because then they're going to dominate the Arctic, which is our backyard. And that just takes all the shipping, cartage, and everything else. This is our backyard, by the way, Team Canada. Yeah. That's ours. Northwest Passage is 100% within our territory. And the only other partner we kind of let do that, the Danes go out and put a bottle of whiskey once in a while. And I think we put a bottle of syrup. And I think we finally settled that after 50 years of that big conflict on one island. But we also let the U.S. use the Northwest Passage. The U.S. right now, so Senator Murkowski of Alaska has been pushing this one. We need icebreakers. And it's Canada, Finland, and the U.S. that need to push these darn things. So who wants to build some icebreakers? These are the things that we need to do to defend our country and our nation. And when we start turning things on their side, when I was talking to the guy from Davies, who's the head of that company, okay, I'm going to digress a bit. I'm doing a lot of it, fully caffeinated.
You go.
Who understands how these icebreakers work? Okay, cool. I didn't either, so I had to go figure this stuff out when I was over there. So here's the path. So there was some really good Canadian technology that came up with how icebreakers can work. You don't actually jam the thing through the ice. You actually get it up on top like a whale and you beach that baby and you start rocking it back and forth and you get it through. That technology was actually developed by a bunch of Canadians, and the Canadian Coast Guard didn't want it. No, Canada didn't either. There was no business case, one of those stories. So they sold it to the Finns. So the Finns ended up taking and building all the icebreakers for Russia. So Russia's fleet was predominantly built by the Finns. They were going like good guns on that until this whole Ukraine conflict, and then that was no good. So then the Finnish yards went down, and then all of a sudden the Russians are building their own. They're getting somebody else to build them, and now we're sitting there with no icebreakers as U.S. and Canada, with this backyard being ours, and everyone else is dominating that space. So that Finnish company bought a Canadian company down in Quebec, and it's tied in with the Americans to build these icebreakers. So when I'm looking at icebreakers, I'm going, they're just big pressure vessels. That's all they are. Take a tank, set it on its side. That's an icebreaker. All that work, all that stuff that takes place with the piping, we do tons of pressure piping and salt water. We treat water all the time. So the issues with these yards that they have is that the shipbuilding guys have been sitting flat-footed for a number of years, and then they're looking at this as like it's their next last job. So they're not trying to get it going quick. So when I'm talking to Davies, I'm going, you guys put the shells together down there. I'll build you all the internal components. I got Edmonton Exchanger over here has the biggest press that we can do for pressure vessels. We got mod yards going. I said, here's the cool thing with that. We'll build out this on the sideline, your ships and the stuff you need for your mods, because we're going to be building all of our infrastructure in our energy sector anyway, and we're really good at it. And he goes, the funny thing, we're in Reykjavik, and he's a Finnish guy. He goes, I was looking at Texas. I'm going, we're Texas North. We're tied into them on a corridor. So between us and Texas, that's where everything gets built. And he's like, no kidding. So these are the conversations we're having when you're in the room. So when we start dominating and being very patriotic and putting our flag back in the ground, saying, what is our territory? It isn't just the 49th parallel and a couple hundred miles north. It's that way. And that's where all the cool kids are going to be playing over the next 20 to 50 to 30 years, all in that context. Yes, sir.
Is this not what back to the free trade zone?
Mm-hmm.
Is this not what the airport was doing with Port Alberta?
Yeah, they started intonating with it. I'm not sure how far they went, but the cool thing with it is that you could literally, when I was talking to Malcolm there as well, and to Myron, there's no limitation how big you make that bubble. So if you're going to do it once, do it a big swath, run that thing around, and then put the context in place. And oftentimes what happens, because we're Edmontonians, we fight amongst each other more than everybody else until Calgary comes to town and then we unify. Stop fighting over that little stuff. Look at how everybody can benefit from it. Because when I'm looking at the macro level and I'm talking to the Secretary of Energy from India, I'm pitching Canada and I'm pitching the entire area in the Pacific Northwest, not just Edmonton, not just Calgary, right? So that's what we got to do. So anything that started, if we can expand on it, if there's that area down in Calgary, if we can leverage that and expand it out a bit more, then let's start looking at that.
Yeah, John, that's a great question, because when you talk to people, they talk about the free trade zone in Edmonton or at YEG. And my question to them was simply, well, A, why don't we know about it? And B, why isn't it being enacted if that is the case? And that falls back on us a little bit, because it is there for us, but I think we need to be very proactive in saying, okay, then we need to make this a very active free trade zone for Edmonton, for the donut area that's there. And we really need to go to both city governments, municipal governments, provincial governments, federal governments, and say it's there. So why aren't we using it, and why aren't we taking advantage of it? And I don't think we're doing that, and we need to do that, especially in light of where we're headed in the next little while. So I think that's a great question. I want to go back a little bit, because I think, I'm not sure what our time is. Yeah, but can I go back to tariffs for just 1 second? Because again, I think it's inevitable. I think there's going to be some percentage of tariff that happens. It's inevitable. Here's my worry. My worry is that there are certain sectors of business and industry that are going to be dramatically affected by this. You say, suck it up, Buttercup. Okay, I get that. But if there are certain industries, big industry that's affected by this, we all know it's going to have a trickle down effect. So if big industry suffers, it means we all suffer in some way. It's a trickle down effect, whether it's cost of housing, automobiles, food, living, all of those kinds of things. Here's my question, and I posed it to the Premier a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to pose it to you. So, like during COVID times.
What was her answer? Tell me that.
No, I'm not telling you. Yeah, no. Tomorrow night we'll talk about it. Tomorrow night with her in the room. But it's like COVID, and both the federal and provincial governments stepped up, and there were subsidies for people who were having a very difficult time in COVID. What's the provincial government's stance on subsidizing business? Should these tariffs be enacted, and should we experience that trickle-down effect? And it's going to hurt the small, medium-sized businesses. How are they going to survive? And it may only be a short run, but how are they going to survive? Is the provincial government willing to step up to the plate in this, or is this just too early to talk about that? Or have you guys been talking about it and you're just not telling us?
So I sit in cabinet. I'm sworn to cabinet confidence. I also sit in caucus, and I'm sworn to caucus confidence. Having said that,
the Premier's answer was better than yours.
Yeah, I'm more direct. She's the boss. She can say whatever she wants. So we got to figure out how to make it work.
I knew you were going to say that anyway, so that's why I set you up.
Let's walk through this, and in the context of suck it up, Buttercup. Yeah. And I love that's where you fixated on. So that was on the pride. Suck it up on your pride. You're going to have to eat crow for a bit and figure this out. We are not the big dog in this equation. We talked about that. So on that side. The other one with that phrase applies is some of the things that others have opposed for years, they're going to have to park that if you want a reality of having schools, paved roads, electricity, not everybody in absolute debt, pay for our homeless and our needy, all those things that we need to do. Yeah, you're going to have to park some of those ideals that aren't quite working out for us. Because again, the harsh reality is we're not known for our massive exports of intellect. What we're known for is hockey, maple syrup, and oil. That's it. Oh,
in that order?
An egg. Yeah, well, it depends on which room you're in. And the egg, right? So we're really good at bulking stuff out. So that's what people want from us. The other stuff will come later, but until that time, you're going to have to actually park a bunch of those other things, be Team Canada, and everyone's going to have to do a little that C word, that compromise, to be able to be on Team Canada. When it comes to the impacts, that's why we took a different approach, Cam. We saw the risk of what was being played out there. We were going to be sacrificed. Every Albertan was going to be sacrificed. And that's why Premier held her ground and said, no, dibs out. You guys do whatever you want in this little kumbaya thing. We're not doing it. And lo and behold, all of those other premiers came around. So without trying to hedge your argument here, I think that given that your Alberta government and your premier has been on the road working at this, and given that your finance minister is a good old farm boy, looking at those realities, looking at where our position is with the commodities we trade, we're going to be in a tight spot. But understanding that, knowing that this is full well at risk, and I think if you look at our track record, not getting in any confidence, but probably if I was a betting person, I would probably have that off to the side of the page going, what if? We can't cover everything off, but I bet you there's a bunch of folks in the room looking at a what if. And what we're trying to do to best of our ability is by having those common sense grown-up conversations and parking the emotions and feelings for a bit, looking at this practicality, is how do we avoid that? The biggest thing that you can see right now is folks are wanting to buy local. They're wanting to buy local until they can't afford to buy local anymore. So there's only so many margins out there. The affordability thing, like this is where things that are out of our control and we're mad as hornets and we can't do anything about them, been fighting with it for years. That's why we need a clean flush down east. If we get the same old, those folks will borrow money from my great-great-great-grandkids to pay for stuff today, and we will literally be the 51st because we will not be able to keep the lights on in the next 30, 40 years.
I think right now part of it, and I was in some meetings this week with businesses in Atchison, is the uncertainty of it all. People just they don't know. And as a result, we have businesses that have lost contracts already, not only because of the uncertainty, whether it's foreign contracts or those kinds of things where people are saying, we're looking at the situation, we're looking at Canada, and there's uncertainty there. So we're going to hold back. They haven't lost it necessarily, but they're going to hold back.
They are.
So,
and everybody, well, the other thing too is, I mentioned is business owners, don't put a friggin' tax on your population before there's even a tariff.
Right.
Like people are already starting to do that.
Yeah.
Like this is ridiculous. This is not a time to try to make an extra cost margin.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
With that, I would suggest one of the silliest things that we could do would be put a tariff, get into a tariff war. I would suggest if the other side wants to do that, that's fine. Sell as much as we can, get as many things going, start dropping down the internal trade barriers, find out what the Canadian products are, support your local business, all those type of things. And again, until we have some certainty, it's not just our region. Everybody's trying to figure out where the next shoe drops. You listen to what's happening in Europe, Middle East, here. Trump's got everybody kind of off edge right now. And even that one German guy crying on stage after J.D. Vance told him they better suck it up and start taking care of that. And he's actually crying. I'm going, wow, this isn't the Germany I remember.
No. Yeah, I got no comment about any of that. Yeah.
When you think about it, removing the internal trade barriers, but one of the biggest barriers for getting shovels in the ground is not at a federal or a provincial, it's at the municipal level.
Yes.
And we're talking about development, permits, bylaws. How is the government going to tackle that?
Well, this is going to get people mad because usually I say things that either they're like, woo, or they just hate it. But the way I explain it, so anyone else run scheduling programs? Primavera. Okay, so it's a parent-child relationship, right? I explained this once when people were asking about the relationships between communities. I said it's a parent-child relationship because
They're a creature of the province.
yeah, and I hate creatures. It reminds me of Dobie the house elf. So would you rather be called a child of the province or like this? So anyway, parent-child relationship. If there's a ton of municipalities that are getting in the way of that, we've asserted ourselves before and tried to help them to fast track things. So here's where I'm going to digress on the model, and if we can get people buying into this. We had this industrial zone model that we actually put in place. So essentially within those industrial zones, if you apply that to an area, geographical area, you're fast tracking, you're pre-approving of what your conditions are. So then you know what a yes looks like. And then you accelerate that. We need that buy-in. So if you guys have an area where you want to designate these as an industrial zone, awesome. And then we can do that. So we kind of put a stamp around Fort Saskatchewan because now you know what your environmental certainty is and what can be approved in those areas. The same thing if you stretch that out as a corridor in between those areas. So now I can say certainty, like let's take 20-kilometer wide corridor, use a backbone of a highway or a railroad or something else. It can be new or not. Let's put that right away and designate it in advance. So then all of a sudden we say, here's your rules and regulations. Fire up my bureaucracy, including the municipalities and the stakeholders, to get to a yes. Show me what a yes looks like. So then when you have that in place, whichever proponent comes into the area basically knows what the rules are, and moreover, the bankers know. You've got some certainty. Then you can get some contracts. So now we'll go out in the front end. Another thing we did on the energy side is we converted to barrels in kind. I know it's a long-winded answer to munis, but it has to play out. So the barrels in kind model now allows us to sit at the table and say, okay, the province has 300,000 barrels a day of something. We can actually trade that rather than just taking it on the market. That gives indicators to when we're sitting across the table that we can actually be that anchor tenant on that pipeline capacity, which will allow mid-sized plays to come in. If it's in one of these postage stamps that we got a free, or one of those tariff, or not the tariff, the industrial zone, and it's connected in a corridor because we want to get to port, and it's tied into, I don't know, Department of Defense, because now we can actually have contracts directly with Alberta and DOD, then we can start to do this. So depends your location. If you're in one of those areas, and if you see with us working with Enbridge, right, and you're in a like-minded county and municipality, you're going to see the lights on come on really quick. We can't do this blanketed across the province. I would love nothing better than the capital region to actually everybody get on the same page and light this baby up, because we've got this much of a window to really capitalize on it. So if you hear of areas, or if you guys have areas where you can think you can start applying some of that logic, my phone number is available to all y'all. I've been in the States so much, I'm going to keep playing that up. My phone number is literally available to all of you, and we will sit with the ministers and we will go through that, and we will move heaven and earth to make this happen, because that's how we're going to stop a bunch of businesses cavitating due to uncertainty. We're going to have to provide some of that certainty. Yeah, and assert ourselves a bit in some of the areas. So that parent-child relationship may get a little tenuous at moments, but it's for the big picture.
But you're going to have to go beyond that, because if we're going to be able to build the pipelines, they're going to bring the people, they're going to need to build the houses. So talking about the industrial is just one faucet of it to help grow our communities.
Yes.
And so it has to go beyond that. And I don't know if the municipalities have the desire to really look at how they're doing their land use bylaws and how they're actually looking at their municipal development plans.
It depends on the municipality. No problem, ma'am. So maybe we'll go back to the level of sophistication of the municipality. If I take little old Marythorpe, it's way different than St. Albert, right? Different models. But if I look at Parkland County versus Sturgeon County, or if I look at Leduc County, the ones that are successful that have picked up on this, so Parkland as an example had to get really clever really quick, because all of a sudden they lost the coal mines and they lost 25% of the revenues. So they got all this cost there. They built up Atchison rapidly because of it. Until then, they were known as basically the worst place to build because they wouldn't approve a permit. They needed a fundamental change. So the way you change those, the perception or their culture, is you change out the politicians that are driving the bus. Like, I don't know how else you do it in that way. And then you have to work with like-minded groups. If you find an area where there's impediments, find one that is actually welcoming business. Again, I'm coming back to that path of the coalition of the willing, because our window is so short. And if you find ones that are just obstructionist, let us know. There's this guy by the name of Rick McIver. I'm sure he'll pick up the phone and talk to RMA, AMA, AUA, XYZ, whatever acronyms are coming up with. And if there's specific impediments in those areas, we can talk to the mayors, and then we can talk about their approval process, and we can make that happen. And I'll use another little microcosm of that. Does anybody know where the Gainford Hotel is?
Absolutely.
Right on. Okay. So little old Gainford Hotel got shut down on the side of the road for years. Little, roadside turnout. Everybody liked the taxidermy stuff and little train. I remember that as a kid. And all of a sudden this thing shut down. There's this group that bought it. 2 people, beautiful couple. The gentleman works on the road. The lady's at home, and she's renovating this thing. It's an absolute project of love and joy, putting her soul into this thing. She's trying to get it approved. And the person, I don't know who the individual was, but
Parkland County employee, I'm sure.
there you go. So there was somebody internally that would not let this happen, to the point of they're saying, we'll never open this thing. She invites the MLA and walks me around. I'm looking at this going, well, this is ridiculous. Like, now I got my project hat on. I'm going, you're doing everything right. Like, this doesn't make sense. So all I did was posted it up on Facebook. Said, this is awesome. Look at all this. And all of a sudden, all these comments. And what do you know? Well, if you're interested in this project, call the county office and let them know your support. Next thing you know, there was a new counselor came in, and he got on board with it, and we actually got that thing up and running. And if you ever want to stop in there and see this little labor of love, it's up and running. Sometimes the simplest little things are just like that. People are people. Coming back down to that whole coffee table diplomacy, try that. And if there's problems, identify who the problems are, and then either you go around or you solve the problem.
Okay, we got like 1 minute left, but can I add to that? Because you're talking Parkland. You're talking Parkland County. While I agree with most of what he said, Where I don't agree with him is well, it's not disagreeing. I think also that a key influence, especially in Atchison, was the businesses of Atchison speaking to Parkland County. For the first time, we actually got the businesses to unite and to speak to Parkland County about these issues. That's what makes change right there. That's what makes change in business.
I won't disagree.
Yeah. Thanks. Tomorrow.
You won't let me.
Ma'am, you got 1 minute.
Piece I wanted to ask was the MD of Greenview did exactly that. They created an industrial area. Is that what you're talking about? I mean, it's been in the news. Kevin O'Leary wants to put a data center.
Yeah.
There's no zoning required. There's no environmental surveys required because they dedicated all of this land to the industrial.
Yeah, and that's what we. Yeah, so we kind of put it in place, the framework of that about 4-ish years ago. And when I first started looking at that, I'm like, as an industrial guy, this is awesome. Because now I know within those areas what you can do. So that's exactly the idea. So when you can put that postage stamp, drop it in place. And now if you took that, that'll fast track the build. And now if you took this whole trade thing and drew that on top of it, all of a sudden the lights really start coming on. And then you connect it to somewhere along a corridor, then it really starts to make sense. Can I give you just one more thing? Just one more thing?
Okay.
Okay. I got a theory.
Even if I said no, you'd do it anyway.
Well,
so
it depends on the crowd here. So I got a theory. I really do. And this is the one I try to explain the corridors with. And usually it gets a laugh. I'm not putting any pressure on you, but I honestly believe that Mickey Mouse and Tony Soprano are the same person. Right? You give them all their money. They're likable characters, but at the end of the day, they're gangsters. Okay? Now, the Sopranos was, running well. He did his business, but little Mickey Mouse, that whole model, like who's taking their kids to Disneyland? Okay, right? So what's the first thing you do? Well, you go through the gate and you pay to get in, right? And then where's the first thing? Oh, there's this welcoming smile and all that good stuff. Oh, okay. And then they point you right towards, your coffee or whatever you're going to do. And then you're on a ride. And all the kids, they're all excited to go on a ride. After you've got this whole endorphin dump, you get off the ride, you go through the gift shop. Invariably, that gift shop points you towards the next ride. Not that I've done this, but I followed the path. Every ride will lead you back to the start until you spend all of your money or you run out of time. So the corridor model, when I'm talking about this, and we're talking about this whole big thing, I tell people I've got one dusty cowboy boot in Alberta and the other one's touching salt water. And salt water doesn't necessarily have to be on our own shorelines. So when I'm asking people when we're coming back to these areas, what corridor are you on? Which port are you hitting? And all of a sudden the lights go on. So start promoting the folks down the road from you on your corridor. And all of a sudden these pieces of the puzzle start to light up.
Thank you. Thanks for being a good sport. Thanks for hearing us out. We get to do this again tomorrow night, but the premier will be there tomorrow night.
Yeah,
but I really appreciate, and can I just say this? I've known Shane for a while now. The one thing I really love about Shane Getson is he is passionate for our province. He is passionate for our province. And I love that. And because of that, we see change. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Just stay there. Stay there if you wouldn't mind. Awesome. Thank you. Now we'll hear from Jasmine, our platinum sponsor from Anderson.
Just wanted to say a heartfelt thank you, MLA Getson. I appreciate your advocacy for Alberta with our southern neighbors. I think it's much needed now. And I see that actually with our government as a whole right now. And it makes me very proud to be an Albertan and very proud to have the Premier and the team that we have representing us. On behalf of Anderson and AEG, I'd like to present you with the transfer agreement between the federal government delegating the authority to the province. And we have another gift as a token of our appreciation for coming out today and speaking to our members and our guests. Thank you very much. Yes. And we cannot forget Cam. We have a gift here made special for you by Catherine. Thank you very much, Cam, for moderating the discussion tonight. You're an amazing moderator. He also has a podcast. Yes. So I believe it's called ABA Coffee in the Park. Give it a listen. Thank you very much.